Hello, I'm Bob von Bargen, President Emeritus of the Armed Forces Heritage Museum, and your host for this series featuring the service of our veterans. Today we will witness the landing of the U.S. forces on Omaha Beach on D-Day, June 6, 1944. You will learn about it as told by Arthur SELTZER, then a 19-year-old U.S. Army radio operator, who arrived in a landing craft infantry, an LCI, with the first wave of troops to hit the shore. The assault was a bloodbath that almost failed. Join me now as Arthur SELTZER tells you about what happened on that fateful day. Once you were in England, what kind of training did you have at that point?
Well, the basic training was, one, that's where we received our trailers and our vehicles for our equipment to be put into, and naturally we would set it all up, and then we would go out on field maneuvers. Also, at the same time, everybody was under the impression, at least I should say the Germans were under the impression, that the invasion was going to come from Calais, France. Therefore, in England, right across from Calais, we started to build a dummy group of vehicles and all kinds of equipment and soldiers, a lot of people who weren't even dressed as soldiers, running around so that they would believe that's where the invasion was going to come from. By doing that, Hitler moved all of his SS troops up to Calais, France.
In your radio, did you try to use any decoy messaging to confuse the Germans also?
Well, the only message we used at the time in England was enough to confuse them. It was nothing that we wanted them to know, and we definitely stayed away from that as much as possible. We felt that our group and all the groups that were involved in this invasion knew pretty well what they were going to do.
The invasion was put off once. What happened, what preparation in the days immediately before the 6th of June? What were you doing?
Well, all the training was being given was in Bristol, PA at the time. Then we went down to Portsmouth. And Portsmouth is a very big port for the English, and that's where our ship was going to leave from. And there we were given training to go over the side of a ship. Now, when I was told that we were going to take training to go over the side of the ship, I was told to bring my full pack, which weighed about 45 pounds, and they gave us enough K rations to last us for a week because they didn't expect to be able to get to us any quicker. And also they gave us our ammunition and everything else that we were going to need. And that's where I took my first step of going over a makeshift ship, coming down with the radio weighing 45 pounds and the pack weighing about 65.
So you got over 100 pounds weight, and now did you go down on the nets, or how did you?
We went down steps. They were not, it wasn't a net, it was better than a net going over, because they said when you go over the side of the ship, those that go over the side were going to be much better than what the practice we were getting.
How about the crossing the channel? How was that?
Well, as you know, crossing, we were on that ship while we were having all that rain, and that was why the invasion was put off. And in most cases, the invasions are usually backed up, if they're land invasions, by other means. Ours was no backup, because our landing was on the beach at Omaha, and if we got driven off the beach at Omaha, we would be in the water, which would have been the English Channel. We were told that we would go out the front of the landing craft. There's 36 men to a landing craft. When the first landing craft went into Omaha Beach, we got a message back immediately: don't go out the front of the landing craft. The machine guns along the beach are all trained, waiting for the gangplank to go down. Go over the side of the ship on both sides and then work your way into shore. When I went over, at that time, I had my pack with all my stuff in, my food, and I was carrying the radio, and I had a lot of weight. And I cannot swim, and down I went. I had to make a quick decision, and I knew I couldn't lose the radio. I knew the pack, I could get another one, so I dropped the pack, and I came up to the surface. When I got up, I noticed there was quite a few other people who couldn't swim. We got together and we worked our way into shore. Before we went over the side of the ship, I was attached, by the way, to the 29th Infantry Division, which I was going to be with when I landed on Omaha Beach. And the 29th Infantry was naturally a fighting division. Now, we got word back when the first landing craft landed on Omaha Beach, 80 to 90% of them were either wounded or killed immediately. The machine guns that were at the bottom of the buff, a buff and at that time was a mountain, and there was no roads to get through the buff. In order to get through the buff, you would have to blow a hole into it. So naturally, down at the bottom was all the machine guns. At the top of the buff were the big guns firing down on the boats. And when I went back with my wife on my tour to retrace my steps, where the machine guns are is now a road has been built. And you can go from one end of the road to the other, visiting every one of the landings that was made that day, and just leave your vehicle and walk down to the beach.
Once you're on the beach, how did you get off the beach?
Well, the story was, first of all, as I start to say, when I finally got up to the beach and worked my way up, I had to hide somewhere because you cannot build a foxhole in wet sand. And the best thing was the wounded from the first landing were being taken back on the vehicles that we came on, the crafts. The other ones that were dead were left there and would be cleaned up later on. So therefore, we only had one place to hide, and that was behind a dead body. We felt sorry that we had to use them, but it was the only way that we could save our life.
So ultimately you moved off the beach.
Well, what happened, I sent a message to the battleships that were off the shore, and I told them that if we didn't get a hole blown in that buff, we were never going to get off the beach. And also, all the equipment that was waiting out there in the English Channel to come ashore, we weren't going to get our equipment. At that time, I got a call from the commanding officer of the 29th, and he told me, I want you to get on the radio and tell these guys that they got to blow a hole in the buff. I said, I've already done that. He says, good. And all of a sudden, the guns opened up, and a buff was definitely blown in it. If you watch the movies, they don't show it that way. They show a lieutenant or someone running up to a private and telling him, I'll make you a sergeant if you put a bag underneath and blow a hole in the buff.
So naval gunfire
blew the hole in, and later on, the 29th Infantry was blowing up more holes once they got the hole in the buff open that the vehicles could start to go through. And the only way was to go forward.
Again. The Omaha Beach landing was just the start of driving the Nazis out of power. One can only surmise what would have happened if Arthur Seltzer had lost that radio when he was leaving the LCI, that Landing Craft Infantry, and was floundering to save himself in the deep water. In the next segment, you will learn about his actions as he moved through France and Belgium and into Germany with the Allied forces, destroying the German army and bringing the war to an end. Well, if you appreciate these videos, I encourage you to make a donation to support the program. Your contributions in any amount can be made at the museum's website. www.afhmus.org. Thank you very much.